Hey everybody, Josh Neighbors here on Hey everybody, Josh Neighbors here on the College Countdown. Glad to have you with us today. Make sure you all like the video, sub to the channel as well. Today's topic, it's what other than the college football playoff, which everybody obviously is talking about right now with the penultimate rankings coming out last night before conference championship weekend. Leave us your thoughts on those. Also, we're talking about what is the best job remaining. 4 Power 4 jobs are open. None of them have been filled. West Virginia, Purdue, UCF, and North Carolina. We'll discuss which job we think is the best and kind of go from there because I think it's an interesting conversation. Also, let us know your thoughts on the question of the day. Did the ACC get screwed? I think it's been an interesting question to talk about. Are they getting screwed right now by the College Football Playoff Committee? Because in some ways they are, but in some ways they aren't. And so there are multiple angles, and that's where we start today with the College Football Playoff rankings. And the best way to go at this is to look at the bracket, right? Because if you look at the bracket, it just basically tells you everything that you need to know about these games, right? Oregon is in no matter what. They play Penn State, so we're just going to assume Oregon, right? Texas plays Georgia. They're both going to be in, so we're going to assume Texas. SMU is playing Clemson, so we don't know. It's going to be a big question mark. And Boise or UNLV will be in, so Boise right here is a 4. And so seeding stuff is up for grabs, obviously, but who's going to be in? Not really there. Penn State's in regardless, we mentioned before. Your 6 seed Notre Dame is going to be in regardless, we mentioned before. Your 7 seed Georgia is going to be regardless. Your 8 seed Ohio State, safe. Tennessee is your 9, safe. Your 10 Indiana, safe. The only thing that can change is number 11, Alabama. It can change by 2 ways. Number 1, if Clemson beats SMU in a narrow way, they could get pushed out. Actually, that's the only way. I would start with number 2. I'm saying one of 2 things will happen here, right? Bama stays in, SMU gets pushed out, and Clemson gets that spot, or Clemson beats SMU and SMU gets that final spot. So, right, SMU wins, they're in, Bama's in as well. SMU loses to Clemson, either SMU stays in and takes Alabama's spot, or Bama will stay in and SMU gets bounced out, right? And so this is the difficult part here is that's what we're facing moving forward, okay? The issue a lot of folks are having was the choice, right? Why is Alabama 11 and who was up against them? And a lot of folks were making the South Carolina argument. Now, I think South Carolina is playing better football than anybody else right now. So I think that, there's an argument there. But here's the thing. You are what your resume says you are. So while I would love to see South Carolina in, they're at 14, and I really just don't think they made much of a push. Ole Miss at 13, I think they are in the right spot. Bama and Miami at 11 and 12 is where the real fight was. Yes, that's where I think everybody thought the real conflict in this situation was. So, to me, I would have gone with Miami, and here is why. Because the resume is like, I know Bama's strength of schedule is good, but I do think the SEC, they've got a lot of good teams, but I do think there is a little bit of propping itself up this year that occurred, right? I think you look back at like the Notre Dame game. I think A&M was really good, but like not much of a great team. But they're nearly a 10-win team. 9-8, whatever it is. Missouri a 9-win team, but man, if they played anybody good, they really just got absolutely smoked. South Carolina, they had their moments throughout the season. Ole Miss had their moments of poor play throughout the season. So I think that conference is a bit more balanced, and that's a good thing. But I don't think the idea that everybody's so damn good is true, because LSU was not good. Like LSU was not that good. They hit their stride middle of the season, but I don't think LSU was really anything to write home about. Like Missouri, excuse me, like that's my alma mater. Wearing the shirt right now, But you look at all their wins, every single win they had was close. I think to me, like the argument once again for South Carolina is they got hot. They've got a quarterback in Lenora Sellers who's really fun to watch. And so from almost a rating standpoint, I would want to put him in. But the problem is they've got those head-to-heads. And those do matter. Ole Miss, man, that crapper they laid against Kentucky was bad. And, Jackson Dart's performance against Florida in the Swamp, like it felt like it was almost darn near disqualifying. Georgia win, great. That was awesome. But then you have the LSU loss, which in a game you controlled the entire time. So just not enough there for them substance-wise. Miami, the reason why they're compelling to me is their resume is not excellent. They don't have many great wins, but they've got a lot of strong wins. They've got strong wins against Louisville, who I think is a good win. They beat the hell out of Florida, and then Florida was bad. The Virginia Tech win was pretty lucky, but it's at least a bold team, right? And then their losses were close. Those losses to Georgia Tech, who we know is good by 4, and also you lost the game to Syracuse, we know is good by 5. Now, I know on its surface it's not, but we know Miami's a competitive team because nobody stopped their offense the entire season. The only team that did anything against Miami's offense, really in a pretty considerable way, to me at least, was Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech did the best job of anybody at slowing them down. I mean, you look at these point totals, 41, 56, 62, 50, and this is now in conference, 38, 39, 52, 36, 53. They scored 23 and a 28-23 loss. We know Georgia Tech's good though, 42 and then 38, right? So if we're going to go because I think the Alabama argument's somewhat compelling, but if you're going to talk about, man, if we're doing the product things, I think it's a part of this, what the product is. I think Miami is going to be more competitive across the board. Here's the thing about Alabama. We know they can get smoked. We know that there's a chance that they can get absolutely drubbed. Neutral field? No. But for Alabama, you look at their losses this year, man, they got wrecked, absolutely wrecked in that game against Oklahoma. Their offense could do nothing against OU. And that was, for Alabama, it's got to be disheartening, to see that happen. Once again, higher highs, quality wins, but I think the overall body of Miami's schedule is good enough. They are one less loss, this season, but still, I feel like from multiple standpoints, like the quarterback, right? It's great that, Cam Ward is as good as anybody. He's been better than Jalen Milroe this year. The resume, good enough. Wins at Cal, at Louisville. You beat Duke, who is good. You beat also, Virginia Tech is a bowl team. You beat Florida by a ton, right? And those are teams on your schedule. Now, look, you could argue the two best teams they played, Georgia Tech and Syracuse. You argue they're the best two teams they played. You could say they lost to, but I think their offense is so competitive, it makes it just like a product that I want to see in, right? And I think they've got the branding that Alabama has. And also, I think I also have a problem with Alabama losing late in the season. I don't have a problem with Alabama being number 11. I just want to make that clear. I'm just saying why my argument is going towards Miami. My Miami argument is that I just and because this was part of the vibes aesthetic last year, Florida State not having their quarterback. Once you make that decision, I think everything else is kind of on the table. I know different committee, whatever criteria, but once you make the choices, Florida State, in my opinion, fuck me. So in the Miami Alabama conversation, to me, it's pretty simple. I know Miami does not have the strength of schedule argument. They've got one less loss though. I know they lost 2 of their last 3, but they lost by a combined 9 points. We did watch Alabama this month get drilled by Oklahoma. Once we saw last season the College Football Playoff Committee make a choice, once again, 14 field in last year, but make the choice to keep Florida State out because their quarterback was hurt, you can kind of go in any direction you want to. In my opinion, last year, Florida State should have been lauded and rewarded for winning in spite of their quarterback being hurt. And at the same time, at the bare minimum to me, they should not have been penalized for it. In my book, it's a plus. Okay. I really do believe it's a positive that they did that, but it cannot be used as a minus in my opinion. And once they did that last year, it kind of opened everything up to a vibes type deal, right? Well, just they lost a quarterback. It's like, yeah, but what about resume? What about you are what your resume says you are? And so I can stomach 2 close losses for Miami, even though they're against unranked opponents. But like Syracuse is good, and we know Georgia Tech's good. We just saw, they were a coin flip away from beating, and a few bad calls away from beating Georgia on the road. And you've got to think, man, hey, like if that Georgia Tech result goes a different way, if they call any of those penalties maybe against Georgia, we could be looking at a different situation because Miami might, that loss might not be as badly looked upon. If you're like, wow, this Georgia Tech team's really, really good. But to me, like, I think Miami's offense makes them competitive with anybody because nobody really shut them down this year. Georgia Tech did, but it was a 28-23 game. So there was no situation where Miami's offense got held down and they got drilled, and like Oklahoma, and Oklahoma, once again, a pretty average team. Like what Oklahoma did to Alabama, there was none of that this year happening to Miami. Now, overall, weaker conference schedule, right? Weaker, they were not playing as good of teams consistently, but still, like OU, OU was, their offense was horrible all year, right? We knew the defense was good, but their offense was terrible all year. And so to me, I lean Miami. I've got no problem at all with Alabama being in there over there. I think there is a compelling argument. If you were to ask me which way you wanted to go, I would say Miami, and I would say the way they play, the way their offense looks, would make me rather put them in when I consider, hey, they don't have the type of high quality wins, but the resume is not terrible. And to me, with how good their quarterback is, we're making a TV product here. We have the choice, like, hey man, let's put them in, because the TV product choice hurt Florida State last year. So why couldn't it help, Miami this year? I'd rather watch Cam Ward. I'd much rather watch Cam Ward play in a shootout type game in the playoff, compared to what else I would watch. And I would say this too. If you did put Miami at 11 and SMU lost, I would say have SMU bump Miami out. Same way I would say if SMU loses to Clemson, I would say, hey, you got to bump Alabama for them. So I think the ACC should be getting 2 teams. I wouldn't say it's a screw job, but I would say that, I do feel bad for the Atlantic Coast Conference, because I do think they've got more than one deserving team. And you could say, multiple leagues have more than one deserving team, whatever. But like, I think it's hard to argue South Carolina, Ole Miss are super deserving. I don't think it's a stretch to say Miami's deserving. I think because it's a 12-team playoff, it's not that hard to say that. And it's not a stretch to say Bama's deserving. But I think if you're going to ask me heads or tails on those two, I'm going to take Miami. That's where I would go. My question would be different. Here's what I'm really wondering about this season. This is my big question. I was talking to a buddy today, and he sent me his rankings, and they were pretty interesting rankings. He had BYU up there, and it's just a good conversation about where he thought teams would go. Do you all think these rankings would look different if the task was to pick the best 12 teams? If your task was to pick the best 12 teams, would this look different? Because I believe it would. I think right now, because I think you get into a whole lot more of who are the 12 best teams at this moment. So almost your schedule becomes this apparatus, this thing that kind of rounds you into form. Because right now, man, it's hard to argue that South Carolina is not one of the 12 best teams. It's really hard to argue that. I mean, can you say, not definitively, like none of this is definitive, but right now, if you look at the run that South Carolina is on right now, you would say, yeah, I think they are. They beat Vanderbilt 20, they got 6 straight, 7 straight. They beat Oklahoma by 26. They beat A&M by 24. They beat Vanderbilt by 21. So those are 3 bowl teams in a row that they beat by 26, 20 plus in all of those games. I'm not going to say anything else about it. Missouri 34-30 because their quarterback made some great plays. They beat Wofford pretty badly. And then obviously on the road, Lenora Sellers does the thing. But to me, close loss to LSU. You got drilled by Ole Miss, and you lost by 2 to Alabama. But the LSU loss could have flipped if one call goes their way. And so Oklahoma, I think, good win. A&M, obviously, we know it's a good win. At Vandy is a nice win. Missouri was a really nice win. And at Clemson's a great win. So they've got this body of work that I would say, if you're talking about who the 12 best teams are, they would go from 14. I think they would pass Miami. If you were to argue as a Miami's lost 2 of their last 3. South Carolina's won 6 in a row. So that's interesting to me. If you went to that argument, if you're doing the 12 best teams argument, how high would Boise State be? How high would you think they would be at this moment in time? I think everything would be generally the same, but I think the kinds of conversations that we would be having and how they would get reflected back onto the rankings would be different. I don't think that's too much of a stretch to say. Let me know what you all think in the comments section. I'd love to know. I think this is a really good talking point, obviously. Let's do some coaching. Let's talk about some coaching things right now. So there are 4 jobs open right now in college football, right? In power college football, I should say. The 4 jobs open are North Carolina, West Virginia, Purdue, and UCF. And so I'm wondering what you all think the best job is. To me, it's between 2 jobs. I think we all know Purdue is at number 4. To me, the 2 best jobs out there are, I would put West Virginia at number 3. Carolina and UCF are the 2 best jobs out there. What order you would put them in is up to you. And so what I would say about North Carolina is this. I mentioned this earlier in the week. North Carolina as a job is incredibly interesting because it is a basketball school, number 1, but it's in the ACC and they've got the Jordan logo, the Jordan branding, and they've got a lot of money. And so it takes the right kind of coach to draw out the investment, I think there. And so they are in a, I think from a prestige standpoint, the ACC is perceived as a better conference than the Big 12. I don't think it's necessarily true, but Carolina's got a longer history in power conference football than UCF does. And so I think that is helpful. I think the branding is a better brand than UCF is. But where UCF makes an argument is that the investment in football is going to be at UCF no matter what. Now, I know their alumni base is huge, but it's young, so they don't have a lot of money yet, but they're going to end up having more money as time goes along. That's what you need. Obviously, they jump to the Big 12. They're in the state of Florida. We've seen the caliber of athlete they can get on offense. Also, the transfer portal, you get the ability to get Florida players who went elsewhere and want to come back home. And so I think all of those things contribute to UCF being a job that's still on the up. And I think they want to maybe find a coach who matches that. I don't think West Virginia is a bad job, but the issue I have with West Virginia's job is the last coach to really succeed at WVU was a coach who brought like he revolutionized offense. That spread that Rich Rodriguez ran really brought offense into the 21st century, like really brought it into the 21st century. I mean, it was kind of the next iteration after the classic pro style. USC, I think, really was that classic pro style that showed you how great it could be if you had the right personnel. Then you kind of get that 2005 Vince Young spread option, but the next form of it was the spread option that Rich Rodriguez ran at West Virginia. And look, the thing is that I'm usually not a pro reunion guy, but Rich Rod is still one hell of a football coach. And you're seeing that right now with what he's doing at Jacksonville State, right? I know the Michigan tenure did not go well for him, but Jacksonville State right now at 9-4 and then 8-4 back-to-back years for him, man, does he have that thing humming. And look, I know he's in his early 60s, I believe, 61. But he's from West Virginia. He played at West Virginia. He obviously coached at West Virginia, and his offense is still getting the job done. And I think guys want to play for him. I really think guys still do want to play for him. And once again, I don't love reunions. It's not my thing. But this is a reunion to me that would make a lot of sense. And so I think that, could they do better than Rich Rod? Sure. Like it depends on what you mean is better. If John Summerall is better, but I mean, Neil Brown was John Summerall before John Summerall, right? So that makes an interesting question of which way should they go? And so, I think that they're the third job, but it's not a bad job, but it's a job that it really takes the right kind of person to win there because you need to have personnel. They had personnel this year that could do something different, but Neil Brown just didn't push the buttons the right way that he did in the past. I appreciate them making a move too, because that was the right thing to do. I once again always reference Arkansas because that's where I'm at and it's where I live now. It's where I cover. But Arkansas did not do that. They could have said, Sam Pittman's got us languishing right now. We're not good enough often enough. And I like the fact that, a school like West Virginia said, we're too average. We've got all these schools rising and falling. Think about the Big 12 as a conference. Think about how the Big 12, how many teams have gone up and down. Sonny Dykes' first year national championship. In the last 5 seasons since 2020, they've had, I think, 8 different teams out of the 10. They have had 8 different teams in the Big 12 championship game. This is back when they had 12, but they had Oklahoma, Iowa State, Baylor, Oklahoma State, TCU, Kansas State. Let's see, you had Texas get in there. You had Oklahoma State again as the repeat. And now you've got Iowa State back again. And then you've got Arizona State. So I think it's 9 maybe in the last 10 years. I mean, that's really impressive. And, I think it shows like you got a chance to do something in that league. And so I think that's where that job and the UCF job are a bit more enticing. Yes, the ACC's up and down, but, Carolina's still Carolina. I think they've got a chance to be like, they're already kind of entrenched at the top, towards the top of that league. But UCF and West Virginia in the league, it's really up and down. And so there's opportunity there to go there and make something. I think it's a really interesting question about which job is better between UCF and North Carolina. I think that Carolina's in a pretty good spot to access talent, not quite the talent that UCF's accesses to, but they've got more history, I would say. But the upside in a place like Florida, where football is everything at UCF, is a bit different. So I think those jobs are 1 and 2. Kind of depends on who the candidates are, right? Big question to me, though. We've got enough jobs open at this point. John Summerall doesn't get one of these jobs. What the hell are we doing? And here's the thing. Might not work out, but the guy is winning everywhere he's going right now. And I think that's enough to say, hey, give him the job. I saw the Scott Frost stuff for UCF. Purdue, I don't know what the hell they're going to do. I've got no idea what Purdue's going to do. So that becomes very, very interesting. But let me know what you all think. How would you all rank these jobs? I've got it Carolina, UCF, West Virginia, and Purdue. Not much separation between Carolina and UCF. And then, not a ton of separation between West Virginia and UCF. But there is some, in my opinion. And then also, I really do think that Purdue, way behind. They can get good coaches, but it's going to be hard. All right, that will do it for today's show. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. I'm at @JoshNeighbors_. It's at CC Podcast JN as well. We'll be back with a weekend preview whenever you catch us. All right, folks. Talk at you all mañana.
We are Rogue Media Sports.